Welcome to the Plugged In Podcast by Sweetwater. I'm your host, Mitch Gallagher. Thanks so much for joining us today. For this installment, we're sitting down to chat with the founders and principals of a new pro audio company, H2 Audio. We'll be talking with H2 Audio's Al Sutton, a Grammy-winning producer and also the founder of Acme Audio and Rust Belt Studios. We'll also be talking with Tim Mead, a pro audio product designer and engineer and also the founder of Q2 Audio, and producer, engineer, songwriter, and entrepreneur Perry Tell. Back in 2018, these three found they shared a mutual love for music that was recorded on Helios consoles back in the day. Everything from the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour to Jimi Hendrix' Axis Bold as Love, from Led Zeppelin to Queen, and from the Rolling Stones to Frank Zappa. They decided to make it their mission to bring back the sound of Helios in bespoke preamps and EQs, both in rack format as well as module format. In this interview, we'll dig into the history of Helios and what made those consoles so special, as well as the H2 Audio story and the gear they're making now. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Plugged In Podcast by Sweetwater. Settle in and let's get started. Thanks for joining us, everybody. So happy to have you guys here with us. We've got Tim, Al, and Perry. Great to have you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Yeah. H2 Audio.
Yes, sir.
And you guys have all got history going back with, of course, Al with engineering and companies you guys have worked in, gear you've designed, and all the different kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about where H2 Audio came from.
Who wants to take this one?
I'll take the start. I was in Detroit. I'm from Detroit. Everyone here's from Detroit. I don't live there now, but I was there, and these guys got together, and Tim had a relationship with Tony Arnold. So a brief history of Helios is that Dick Swettenham designed and built these modules, these units for a variety of studios in London, and then he passed in '89. Tony was his protege and took over and started to build his own Tony Arnold units, and he built a relationship with Tim. Tim was very instrumental in fixing a lot of those units and maintaining some of those units. And when Tony passed, Tim had been talking to Al, and we all got together, and we just really love the technology.
Right.
I did a record in the 80s at Trident. I wanted to work at Trident, Olympic, or Abbey Road, or all of them. Had the pleasure to work at all of them over time, but
Nice.
That was like the mecca, right? And so for us, the Helios meant so much to us from our youth, because all those records, all those great Stones records, all those great Zeppelin records were done there, and we were just like,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the list of, that kind of became the thing, right?
Yeah.
At Olympic. And
Exactly. And we felt
Island
that had
Studios.
Island, yeah.
Yep.
we felt that had been lost. We felt that had been sitting and been forgotten. And we kind of felt it was a crime to forget about such a brilliant technology, such a relevant piece of the history.
Sure, exactly. They made the consoles from 69 to 79. Something like 50 consoles through the years. Is that correct?
All right.
And there's not
right. It's
not that many of them
sure.
that are still out there and still in use.
I think there's a really accurate record of it personally, but that's about that.
Somewhere around there, yeah. Right. So what was it about those consoles that was so different? What made everyone go, wow, I want to record at Olympic because of this console?
Do you want to take that one, Tim?
I know.
I
I wasn't there. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Really.
No, I think part of it was because when they were building those consoles in the basement of Olympic Studios, they were, and there is some modules that are called Olympic Sound that are Helios modules before they really, I think I can only speculate on the history of it. It's the fact that they were mass producing these things, and they were kind of the first company to really sell consoles to other studios. But the design of it's really simplistic from the electrical engineering point of view, but it's very, very elegant sounding for how simple it is, And Tim can elaborate more on the design because he's the smart one here with all that stuff. But it's a distinctive sound, and I think for me, it's really entrenched with a lot of music that I love, and I think for most people. But I enjoy the fact that they were technically really you can argue they're one of the first mass-produced consoles before Neve.
Yeah.
Sound Techniques was making some stuff that became Trident. They started selling boards too, but they kind of spawned that market. And before that, it was you want to have a studio, you got to hire an engineer, design us a console, put it in, and that's what would happen, and everyone was unique to their studios,
Right.
So I think they just made it mass appeal, and it was just fortunate that it sounded amazing,
Right. I think there's something to what you're saying, though, just the elegant sound quality. And obviously the artists went in and heard that because they also put Helios consoles into their studios. Clapton and The Who and the Stones Mobile and, a variety of
Ronnie
different
Lane
places.
Mobile.
Right. All these different places. But it was beyond even just that whole wraparound design at the time had to be just space age, right?
Yeah.
That
Still looks cool.
The whole physical aspect of the console was different from things that you were seeing as well.
Yeah, like you look at boards before that, and like I use Motown Studios for an example because we're Detroit, and I'm a big, proponent of Motown. But you go to this, the museum now, and you look at that board, and it just looks like a piece of sheet metal with some holes drilled in it. But it was custom made for that studio, and it's the one of one. It's the only one, and they made a few other boards for the other rooms, but no two are alike. So I think Helios brought this repeatability and consistency to it, by coming up with a circuit design and a bus design, and then a configurable bucket that you can put it in any way you want it, and it just gave it this sort of, shopping thing where it's not a one-off. It's, know what you're going to get. You can configure it the way you want it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Tim, when you're having worked on the consoles and knowing the electronics, did you go back and try to duplicate a specific example, or did you have more of a general idea of what Helios was and go from there?
Well, we looked at a few things, right? We looked at mainly the 0011, but that did exist in sort of different forms as time went on, and they changed the shape or the color to a degree. But
and some of the EQ points on the very early ones have slightly different EQ points.
Changed a little bit over time, but really the circuitry kind of stayed the same as far as the preamp section, the amplifier section. So then the game we played was the transformer, the input transformer. So that was really the most difficult part of it, was getting that dialed in. I feel like we went through some iterations and some companies that disappeared on us and things, like more than once, actually, that happened,
Then a pandemic hit.
Then there
was a pandemic on top of all that.
That shut a company down. And anyway, but I think it was really just, we studied a handful of original modules, I don't know, six or eight of them, I want to say.
6 or 8 modules, yeah.
Something like that. And, so you could see little small changes, but nothing drastic in that. So, yeah.
Those in any of that gear, the transformer is such a critical part of it. And I know it was a unique. I'm actually not familiar with the transformer that was in there. It was a different transformer than you see in many of the other things that were out there.
It was a Lusterphone M10, which was like some company, I think, that made phonograph players, and they just made this transformer, and it was on all the early ones. But at some point, they went out of business, so they switched over to the Biodynamic, the little micro transformer, which we almost had. But then, that transformer company, that was still being made right when we started this. But by the time we got around to ordering some, they were like, we discontinued transformers. So that went away. Because that was a great transformer also. And there's more Helios modules with the Bio transformer than there are with the Lusterphone. But they sound very similar, but the Lusterphone is just a little better, and we were fortunate enough to have some original ones and reverse engineer them. And we found a company to actually make them after about 3 or 4 tries.
Right.
Right.
Perry, that's got to be interesting, putting together a company and the team, but then also sourcing all of this stuff and just deciding to do it, that you're going to, bringing the team together. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Sure. Yeah. I do a lot of startups myself. I moved out of Detroit and live in California, so I've been doing a bunch of software and tech startups for a while. But in Detroit, it's a different thing, and this is engineering. This is a industrial design.
Right.
And then, like they said, the pandemic hit and the supply chains went crazy. So, every time we thought we had a solution, we didn't have a solution. We really had to dig deep. And I kind of looked into some of the people who were making transformers and inductors, were making them for 10 or 12 companies. They couldn't fulfill. They were delaying. And I kind of did some deduction that if these guys go out of business, 12 companies are host. Right. I don't want to be one of them. I want to build our own proprietary supply chain to the sense that we can. Quality is super important to us. Making it in America, making it in Detroit is super important to us. We don't skimp on supplies, on materials, on switches, on knobs. We use high quality stuff because that's what it deserves. Could we cut corners and offer a cheaper one? We could, but that's kind of not what we're about.
Right.
And we wanted to recreate it as close to the original as we possibly could. So fixing the supply chain was number one. And once we got that down, I think the big problem for us also in COVID is because in the beginning we had supply chain. We had every unit that was created was already accounted for. So we couldn't do, normally you'd push out and you do a bunch of marketing as a new company, and you go out and do your socials and do it all. We were a little afraid. I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis here, because if we can't fulfill, we're in deep trouble. So we really stepped it up very carefully until we were ready to mass produce and make sure we had everything dialed in.
Right. Well, we're so excited to have you part of the family here at Sweetwater.
And glad to be here.
And I mean, it's so incredible that you've so accurately recreated those. And I think at this point, let's talk about the current products. We've talked about some of the history and things, but based largely around three components, right? There's the preamp, the EQ, and the compressor. And each one of those in the Helios lineage, if you will, is unique from other preamps, compressors, and EQs. Tell us a bit about that and the product line as it stands now.
Want me to take it?
Sure.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay, so the 0011 is our flagship product, and that's the recreation of the original channel module. So that's the 4U, vertical module that has to go in the proprietary rack. So that is the mic pre and the EQ all in one module, and it's the same layout as the original ones as well. The only thing different is we have a different connector because the original connector that's on the original ones doesn't exist anymore. So we couldn't use that, and we were trying to make it so you can put vintage ones in our rack, but that's just, it's just those connectors don't exist, so we just scratched that idea. So from that, we broke out into the 500 series. We separated the preamp and the EQ simply because of space. If we wanted to build it right, we couldn't squeeze it into, we could have if we wanted to go to like all surface mount technology and really skimp down and get it into one 500 series box. But the knobs would be so small, you'd need like a pair of tweezers, and I would have to have a magnifying glass just to see it. And we didn't want to do that. So we wanted to build it with the same exact components that are in the 0011. Same switches, same, knobs, same transformers and everything. So that's what we ended up doing. So each one of those units, the preamp and the EQ, they fill the whole entire inside of each one of those boxes. There's no room to put anything more. So to put them both together, it just wasn't feasible.
Sure.
And then the compressor was designed by ADR, which Tim owns Q2 Audio, and he makes the compacts, which is the basis of what the Helios compressor was. It was originally the F700, then it became the 760, or it was, H700, H760. F was the...
Well, that's our, as we
Oh, no,
call
no.
it H, that's us.
Was it us? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
They always call it the F because it's literally straight from ADR.
But so Helios took the circuit, but they created their own control board, and I don't know why they did that. Maybe you have some insight on that.
Well, they just changed the front panel in the envelope that it's in, right, to fit their desks. So the controls were the original ADR design, the crazy ratios like we're using on ours. It looks strange, but it's really not.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit of math involved.
A little bit of math.
But when you look at the ratios on it, but it works really, really quickly. You just can dial it in really fast. So that became the three things. The compressor was kind of the third thing we did. We spent all the time getting the 0011 done, making that work, and that's where everything was. And everything else from that is all, spawns off of all that. So it it just repackaged for, whatever format people want, because I know people want a lot of things, and then the channel strip came on, and that was kind of a Sweetwater thing, to be honest with you, because Morales was like, you guys need to make a channel strip. And he just kept, anytime I'd come here with Acme, he'd be like, you need to make a channel strip, I'm like, all right. So we made one just for you guys.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome.
The compressor is really a unique unit, Al. You want to talk to the origins of that compressor and what it's known for?
The whole Helios sound, like we use, when the levee breaks, right? The most famous drum tone, that is all Helios preamps, Helios compression, ADR compression Helios, and that's the Rolling Stone mobile unit, I believe, right? Because that was at the Headley Grange studio. And it was just 2 Beyer 160 microphones over the drum kit. It's the greatest tone ever. And, it's a pretty damn good drummer too. He kind of helped a lot on that, so. That's that compression, that ADR Helios compressor just smacking that stuff, and it's a one of a kind, you know, it really is, and it's a very underserved unit in the recording economy.
Right. So you've got the channel strip, which combines preamp, EQ, compressor. You've got the stereo, preamp, EQ, also a rack unit, and then in the 500 series, you've got the preamp, you've got the EQ, and the compressor.
Well, no, we don't have a 500 series compressor.
You don't? Okay.
Well, no, I don't know. I'm not going to say we do because we're not. I don't know if we're going to make it or not.
Okay.
It's a question of like, you know, I don't know. It's a lot of work to make.
So we'll have to have you back after you decide.
It's designed.
You know,
it's just not. We're not sure we want to go there yet.
Sure, I understand.
We got to sell what we got right now. You know, if people start really requesting it, you know, we'll think about it. You know, it's just
500 series is interesting. It's kind of a different market, and part by design and function. We split, as Al said, we split up the preamp and the EQ on the 500 series. But also there's some people who only want to buy the mic pre.
Sure.
And some people may only want to buy the EQ. So it gives a chance to open up to a different price point and a different market.
Sure.
But the quality's still there, but different people have different stuff and different configurations in their studio. So it opened us up to that market. We're not sure if we want to put the compression in there, but you never know.
Sure. Well, all right. We'll stay tuned and see.
We'll take a poll.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Sounds good. So I'm often asked, is there a difference with the rack gear versus the 500 series gear? Can you expect the same? Are they identical? You mentioned that you're using the same transformers, the same components. Sound is all identical?
Are you saying in general or in our product?
On your products, yeah.
I think we nailed it. We had to make a smaller input transformer. It's the same transformer. It sounds identical, but it had to be shrunk down physically to fit into the 500 rack. But it's the same circuit in both, you know, same transformers, same output transformers.
There was, early in the 2128 early releases, we used a Cinemag transformer, which unfortunately was affected by COVID. So this is where we had to retool. And now like Al said, we've made a better transformer that sounds identical to the 0011, even though it's physically a different format to fit in there. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, that's awesome because you really can. I mean, that's what I was trying to get to. Is you can be confident whatever format you're going with, you're getting the Helios sound. You're getting the same thing.
Yeah, we wanted to make it just configurable to what you have in your studio.
Sure.
So if you buy two of the 500 series, equates price-wise to one of the 0011s. Two of the 0011s equates equally in price to the stereo unit and so on. So we try to make it very modular that way. Yeah.
Sure. It makes sense. So when you're developing gear that's based off of vintage products and you're working with analog hardware, there's got to be some interesting things that you have to get into to get it right and to dig into it. Was there specific testing you guys did? Was it all by ear, or how did you go about that process?
Well, I'd say
take that one,
there
Tim.
was both, right? We sit there and, check EQ points and cues and different stuff, and then frequency response, all the standard audio kind of tests you would run on something, noise floor, I don't know, THD things, THD spectrum, right? So you can see what's really coming out above your fundamental you're putting in, stuff like that. But then we sit there and listen to it too, and at carefully, as we were just talking to, in the studio,
Sean.
Already forgot.
Tim just got here.
But he was talking about how the carefully matched levels and all this sort of stuff, and you have to, right? Because it's just a little bit of level difference, and this one's better because it's just that little louder, sounds more open or whatever. So we did that, right? Carefully set levels within a better, 1/10 of a dB or better, and then sit there and A/B it, and try to not be biased as you're doing it, right? Like I want this to be better or that to be better, and I feel like we
did good, and we brought in a lot of people to do additional critical listening. Like, we made sure all the engineers that work in the studio side of the building, we would bring them over and we're going to have a listening day, and we'd have people come in, friends of ours that are musicians, that have real critical or mix engineer people that don't work at my studio, and let them just blind taste test everything, and our goal was to make sure that they couldn't tell the difference between a vintage one and a real one, and we achieved that. Like I was saying earlier, we actually even had the transformer removed and taken apart, and we took it to the University of Michigan, and we scheduled time on the electron microscope, and got the metallurgy of that metal, and just to make sure that when we had them built, we knew exactly what type of alloy we wanted. And that was a pretty fun day, actually.
I bet, yeah.
I really want an electron microscope. I will have to say, it's amazing what you can do.
Just have around the house.
Pick up an old one, you know.
But also getting the modules, finding them, because there's so few of them really around and in existence.
Expensive.
And usually when you can find them, even though they're expensive, they're not in functional order. But luckily, Tim knows how to repair them.
We knew this guy who knows how to fix gear.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are still a few of the consoles out that are functional and and still going as well. Right.
I'd love to have one.
Yeah. Wouldn't we?
That'd be great. You know, like a little 16-channel sidecar that wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, fantastic. But in the meantime, of course, you guys have the gear.
We do.
So I also have to ask the tough question. There are a few plug-in versions. And you've got the analog hardware versions. Tell us what the attraction is for you guys with using the analog gear.
Wow.
I'll take it first.
Take it first, but there's a lot there.
I use hardware. I mean, I'm a recording engineer and a mixer first and foremost, you know, and I don't use plugins, and I don't like plugins, you know, and I have a plugin for Acme, and I think it's a really good plugin, but I think it's just because I'm an older guy, you know, and I've grown up on a console, and I'm not very good with a mouse. You know, I can use Pro Tools, and I'm sufficient with it, but it's just cumbersome for me versus grabbing a piece of gear and using it. And it's not even a debate. The hardware always sounds better than the plug-in, and I'm sure that's going to spark a big internet blowout, and I welcome it. You know, because I mean, I'm just saying anybody can come to my studio if they want, you know, and we can put up the real piece of gear, and we can put up the plug-in, and we can A/B it, you know, and like it's not going to be apples and oranges, you know. It's going to be the hardware is always going to win, you know. So, but that stuff's expensive, and I understand, and then you know, it's not easily recallable, and there's all the reasons that the plugins work, you know, and so that's kind of where I sit with hardware. It's, you know, I'm lucky enough to have it and use it, you know, and that's why I do. But other people do great work with it. You know, I have a lot of my younger engineers that work out of my studio mix in the box, and they do phenomenal things, you know, and I listen to that, and it's just different, you know, it's great. It's just a different sound, you know, so there's really no right or wrong, but for me, it's it's just the way I'm wired, you know.
Understood, yeah.
I'll sum it up a slightly different way, and you know, I mean, this day and age, it's all dependent on the person and the engineer first. I mean, Steve Lacy records on his iPhone, right, and you can do that. For me, I'll tell you a little story. I just finished 4 years producing an album for myself, and I have a fairly well-appointed home studio. Thank you, Sweetwater. And I came to Detroit to Al's studio, and I played all the tracks in the big room, and Al said to me, "Oh, man, you went 90% there, and you didn't go all the way." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You didn't do the real drums." And I didn't do the real drums because I didn't have the hardware to pull off the real drums at home. So I said, "How am I going to do that?" And he gets on the phone without talking to me, and he says, "The guy will be here in an hour." Sure enough, he shows up, and we cut live drums through these Helios channels. And honestly, I just danced around the studio for weeks. It sounded so good, and what it does to the record, it just takes it from a 1D into a full dimensional recording. It just changes everything. And I have hardware as well, and I use both in the box and hardware. Al's right. It's non-comparison. The plugins for Helios that I have seen are not great, in my opinion. They're adequate,
I mean, who even makes them?
But they're not fantastic from what I've seen. And I think, well,
clearly you guys have gone back to the source and recreated the
I think that, yeah.
And even in a studio where you're working, many of us now are working hybrid. So we're doing both, and we've got key pieces of analog gear. And certainly something like the Helios gear that you guys are making can bring that life, can bring that depth, can bring that 3D quality that analog does so well into a hybrid workflow as well, and you get the best of both worlds in those kind of situations. And so it can be a very powerful combination, but that direct link back to the sound that so many of us, whether you're of a certain age or not, look back to as our touchstone for the way that records should sound.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no more direct path back than Helios and certainly what was happening at Olympic in those days.
100%.
Yeah.
But we're all in our 20s.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm a little bit older than you are. So, well, fantastic, guys! Congratulations so much.
Thank
We're
you.
so excited to have you here at Sweetwater, and the gear's just fantastic. Highly recommend that you check this out because it's going to bring something to your recordings that you just can't get any other way, and this is the way to do it. So be sure to check out the H2 Audio gear. Tim, Al, Perry, great to have you guys here. Thanks for joining us
Good
on
to see you
the
again.
Plugged In podcast here at Sweetwater, and come back soon.
We will.
Thanks very
All right,
much.
thanks a lot.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I hope that you enjoyed this installment of the Plugged In podcast by Sweetwater. Special thanks to H2 Audio's Al Sutton, Tim Mead, and Perry Tell for spending the day with us here at Sweetwater and for sitting down for this interview. It was a real pleasure to talk with them, and it certainly has me inspired to chase after some of that Helios magic for my own studio. You can learn more about H2 Audio at their website, but be sure to head over to sweetwater.com or contact your Sweetwater sales engineer for full information on all the great new Helios-based gear from H2 Audio. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mitch Gallagher, and this has been the Plugged In Podcast by Sweetwater.